Welcome to the HMO Property Show by investors for investors. Brought to you by the HMO Property Co, Australia's leaders in impact investing. Investments made with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside a positive financial return. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gibb, and this week we've got rooming house expert, Mr. Mark Baker. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Neil. How are you?
I'm going very well, thank you, mate. Very well. We've known each other for about 4 or 5 years now.
It'll be something like that. When was it? It might have been about 2017, might it?
Yeah.
16 even.
Yeah, and you, I basically do what you do in Perth, and you do same thing in Victoria. So obviously, calling yourself the rooming house expert, you operate in the rooming house sort of industry over there.
Yep.
And you also, you've got a few little things going on as well, haven't you? You've got
several.
Committee member and director of the RAAV, which is the Registered Accommodation Association of Victoria.
So the peak industry body for rooming houses.
Yep. So you are the go-to man in Victoria when it comes to rooming houses.
It certainly turned out that way.
And like cash flow in general, I mean, you've been investing in cash flow positive properties for the last 30 years.
Yeah, near on it.
Yep. And then rooming houses for the last 10 to 11 years.
Yeah, 2011 was my first one, so yeah.
So it's fair to say you know a few things about them then.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much everything I do now, or has been since I got into it. I got stuck into it in a pretty big way when I got started.
Yeah.
And pretty much everything I do now is some way rooming house related.
Yes, that's the same as us, mate. We started off doing standard resi, and then we were like, hang on, this cash flow thing's really good. And you've got the Superman T-shirt behind you there as well. So you've got the Super Cash Flow banner.
Yep, that's the one.
And that's with you and your son Stuart as well.
Yeah. So there's the development business. There's another one where we build new rooming houses for clients, and some for ourselves too.
Fantastic, fantastic. Mate, it's always good to keep building the own portfolio up.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Mark, over the last 10, 11 years, how have you seen the standard of accommodation change from when you first got into it to what it's like now?
Well, I suppose from my own experience too, and a lot of my early stuff was converted properties, and done on a budget through not having a huge amount of money. Mm-hmm. But then also from being involved in RAAV and other things in the rooming house space, I've seen a lot of the older properties as well, which do end up getting pretty run down. Over the last 5, 6 years or so, there's probably been really more of an upswing in the new purpose-built stuff. So with more studio-style accommodation where people have got their own ensuite. The newer build stuff, you've got better soundproofing in and things like that. So certainly seeing a big shift from what people's perception is of what a rooming house or boarding house is, where it's all lower end of the market, to more professionals living in better quality accommodation. Just through, housing affordability is one of the things that gets talked about a lot. The housing stock that's available, and you're probably encountering this over in Perth as well. Yep. You've got a lot of old unit blocks and things like that were built in the 50s and 60s, and they're not getting replaced. And there's still single people looking for accommodation. So this uplift in quality of what's being provided in rooming is really where that market's headed now.
Yeah. And you touched there on the perception of this style of accommodation as well, because it's definitely got a stigma around it. And, the style of accommodation that you bring to the market, and as us here in Western Australia as well, it's totally different to what people see. And when we take people through, they go, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And I think, like you say, the perception is this dark, dingy, run down, trying to get as many people in one house as possible. But that's not the outcome we're looking for, is it, mate?
No, it's not. It's not. If that's what you've got, it's higher maintenance, higher running costs, all that sort of stuff. You want it to be easy. Yeah,
absolutely. How do you see the rooming house market change over the next 10 years then?
Look, I think it'll continue on the trajectory it's on. Like, a lot of the older stock will get replaced with newer style stuff. And we've seen that happen with some of the larger, old class 3 rooming houses that we had over here in Victoria, like the Gatwick in St Kilda. That was the building that was renovated from 60 rooms to 5 apartments on the block in 2018. And then 2019, they did another one around the corner, the Oslo, which was a 70-room, rooming house that had been there for, a long time. I mean, I think the owners of those had been running them for 40, 50 years, and probably their parents before that.
Yep.
So a lot of that old style stuff's been replaced with, new apartments, nice high end things, and of course the people that live there, where do they go? So the stock's got to keep on getting renewed, and better quality stuff will come as that happens.
How big is the market, Mark?
Well, yeah. Look, I think you look at anything like suburb profiles on realestate.com.au now and get the demographics. Most suburbs are up to over 30% single people now.
Yep.
And if you take that, what's the population of Australia? 25 million. So what are we talking there? 4.5 million single people or something like that?
Yep.
Just on rough numbers.
I think on the ABS the release that the ABS did, they said there's 26% of the households are single or lone person households.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and let's think about the people that are actually living together as well, that don't want to live together and want to live in a rooming or shared accommodation. The market's huge, and it's only getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And actually, I was having a look at some of that earlier today, even because the increase in rooming house registrations in Victoria, what's been happening over the last few years to the stock, there's probably, and I suppose we can get reasonably good numbers because there's a registration requirement. We'll ignore the unregistered stuff because there's probably plenty of that too. But with the registrations, they're adding probably 50 a year. And, let's say, we can, as you know, over in Victoria with the planning scheme here, we can do 9 bedrooms pretty readily. But let's just assume that, it's a bit less than that, and we've got an average of, say, actually even just call it 8 rooms. Let's say it's an average of 8 rooms. So 50 of them's 400 rooms a year.
Yep.
Even if you look at the immigration numbers, right, that was at 160,000 into the country and they want to bring it up to 200,000. Let's say only 20,000 of those come to Victoria. Well, 400 doesn't touch 20,000, does it?
Yep. It's huge. Absolutely huge.
Yep.
And we always talk about the social side of things with this style of accommodation as well. How many people do you think you've helped into accommodation over the years?
It's an interesting question. And I do have a database of all past residents, and there'd be a few thousand on there at least now. So I don't know, probably 3,000-4,000.
Yep. How does it make you feel on a night when you get into bed knowing that you've helped that many people?
Oh, look, it's good. I mean, it's interesting because you get people that appreciate it and you get people that don't.
Yeah. So, we're dealing with humans at the end of the day, aren't we?
Yeah. So sometimes you sort of think, this is bloody hard work or something like that. But then other times when you get something where you've got, a rewarding story and someone that you have helped that's appreciative of it and moves on and all that sort of stuff, it's really good.
And when we look at the investment side of things as well, we're not just helping tenants out with affordable accommodation. Investors are getting much higher returns on their investment.
Yeah.
How many investors do you think you've helped as well at the same time?
Look, it's not something I've really tracked, but if I go back through, it's been quite a few years, and there could be 50 to 100 in a year, so it'd be several hundred.
Yeah.
It really would be several hundred, and it's something I haven't really thought about or taken the time to look at.
Yeah. We call it the double-edged feather. The double-edged sword, because it's a win-win, isn't it? The tenants win, the investors win. It's incredible. Let's talk about the demographic of tenants as well, because it's a big question I get asked a lot. And be interested to see if you're getting the same sort of demographic as what we get too.
But I actually have a pretty broad range. A lot of the newer stuff that we're doing is, often working professionals. We do a fair bit regional as well, so out of Melbourne. So we're getting some of the employment providers, the work providers for people that are coming from overseas for work. So we're working with a few of them. So we're getting people that are working in farming industries, meatworks, whatever else. we're also getting a lot of the professionals, say, in hospitals, for example, like if there's a major regional hospital that's doing an expansion and they'll do work placements there, and it might be 6-month placements, and it makes a hell of a lot more sense to go and rent a furnished room than to try and get a few of your mates together, rent a house, have to get furniture, maintain the place, do the lawns, all that sort of stuff. So that's a pretty massive market. We've even had some instances where we've got like a couple of regional centres, and we've had a doctor that's doing placements at both hospitals, renting a room in 2 houses.
And still saving money.
Yeah.
What about age range of tenants? Do you have a sort of stat on that? I suppose I'm not incredibly involved in the day-to-day operation of that business anymore, but look, I would think in the professional market, they're probably younger. So to be, 20s, 30s and stuff like that in a lot of the professional market. I was going to touch on, we do a broad range of markets. So I do have, I said a lot of my early ones were converted properties, and we operate some of those for other people as well. Some of those are lower end of the market and are people on welfare payments. Again, we try and keep those as steady as we can, put similar people in similar houses. But there are some challenges with renting those, and I do have a bit of an insight into where some of the stigma comes from. But really, a lot of it then depends on how well managed the place is and how on top of things you are. Like, you've got to be super responsive. Deal with any issues and not tolerate crap from people. We'll touch on property management pretty soon because, again, it's a big topic. And I know that. I'd love to know more about the different policies around the country as well, because you touched on there, Melbourne's got the rooming house policy. You can have up to, is it 9 people or 9 rooms? 12 people, 9 bedrooms. 12 people, 9 bedrooms. Incredible.
You can go more than that, but that's what you can do in most cases without a planning permit. So planning exemption, straight to the building permit, and away you go. So it's certainly probably the easiest and fastest place to get, the maximum number of people into a house,
and what about,
most of the places around the country.
What can you do in New South Wales?
New South Wales, New South Wales had a pretty good run for quite a while. They had a new generation boarding house policy that came in 2012. I think it might have been November last year. They've tightened that up a lot. Like, there was changes over the time, like they changed parking ratios and all that sort of stuff. They've tightened that up a fair bit, and now saying for a boarding house, it has to be run by a community housing provider. So anything that's DA approved now you can do, but beyond that you can't.
Right.
Now, some of the advantages there were that you can do bigger places, and there was a complying development type thing. So as long as you could tick all the boxes, you get it through. So it sounds like it's a bit challenging now that they've taken away that boarding house thing. But they brought in a new co-living policy in New South Wales, which actually looks remarkably similar to what the boarding house one was. So there's still some pretty big opportunities. Depending on the zones, you're limited to 12 people in some zones, but there are zones where you can go bigger. Right. There's still DA application required, but it's like you can tick all these boxes. You pretty much take away any grounds for refusal. They're assuming a minimum of 6 rooms. Their common area size is pretty big. So again, differences in what they require in planning from a building point of view. New South Wales has larger minimum sizes for rooms than, say, Victoria and Queensland, but it's also the only state that has a maximum size.
Right, okay. Maximum. How big is that? Do we know?
25 square metres.
Yeah, that's a good size as well.
Yeah. And you can't have more than 2 people in a room in New South Wales, where Victoria and Queensland, there's occupancy limits that increase based on the room size. Okay.
Cool. Let's touch on Queensland a little bit then. What's the policy that's in place there?
Queensland's a bit of a mess because every council's different. Brisbane City Council have got a pretty broad exemption for up to 5 occupants. Gold Coast's 4. Noosa's got some variations, and there's council contributions. A lot of the other cases up there's some pretty hefty contributions to council and a planning application and all that sort of stuff. Like some of the councils, like Moreton Bay, they're sort of okay with stuff where they're looking at student accommodation, but still there's pretty hefty contributions to the councils. So really, for Queensland, you're probably looking more at Brisbane than anywhere else.
Okay. Awesome. Do we do?
So hopefully the state government do something about that soon.
What about South Australia? Do you do any work down there?
Look, we're starting to look at that a little bit. I haven't actually got up to speed on because they've had some big changes to their planning schemes. I keep on saying recently, but it's probably last year. So I don't know what's happened to the time. Yeah. So they've got a state planning portal now, and the stuff that was in the planning scheme around rooming seems to have been pulled back a bit. So it's less clear there. However, I do think there's some opportunities there. As far as the residential tenancies that goes, they're pretty clear. 2 or more people. Pretty much it's a rooming house, but and a lot of the councils are pretty flexible up to about 5 people over there. But that's not to say you can't do more. And I'm sort of looking through some stuff, and there's some people looking at it. It looks like there's some opportunities to go bigger in South Australia, but it's just not clear in their planning scheme at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Northern Territory, do we do anything up there?
Yeah, Northern Territory, both of the territories actually, and Northern Territories more recently, legislation they had around boarding is what it's referred to in their policies there. A lot of the legislation's been repealed. So there's nothing there.
Right.
Northern Territory, I think, was only 2014 and ACT was about 2000. So you can still do it, but it's less clear how you go about it. Yeah. ACT did bring up a thing a while ago saying, there's more people living in this type of accommodation. Perhaps we should have a policy around it. Well, you did have it until you repealed it.
What about Western Australia for the listeners that don't know?
Look, Western Australia. Typically there you're pretty right for up to 6 people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the stuff you're doing is 6 studio rooms and stuff like that as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, correct, mate.
So, you're pretty right up to 6 people. I mean, legislation there, you probably know, the lodging houses what is it? Is it the Innkeepers Act or something like that, the old legislation there?
The health and safety, so I can't remember the name of it now.
Yeah, but what year was that published? Do you remember?
76 or something.
I think it was 1912.
Oh, was it? Yeah, right.
There was some talk over there. Probably it might have been around 2020. I was either 2019 or 20 about updating the legislation over there, and they were looking at other states, and Victoria was one of the states they were looking at.
Yeah.
So we were looking at giving them some feedback from RAAV.
Yeah.
And of course, everything got put on the back burner through COVID and all that sort of stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if the WA government do return to looking at bringing that into the modern age.
Yeah, it needs to. I mean, the policy that's here now is good, but it's still very unclear as well at the same time. When we look at different policies around the country, and we're going to touch on building classifications now as well. In Western Australia, we don't necessarily need to do anything to the building. However, we do for the safety aspect of the people that live there. So we will touch on different classifications of building now because, as we know, a standard dwelling. Oh, Siri just kicked in. As a standard dwelling, it's just a Class 1A building.
Yep.
And then once we start going into rooming or lodging or boarding, we generally have to change the classification of the building. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's to Class 1B?
Typically Class 1B. Well, I suppose we can touch on it anyway now that we're talking about it. So the building classification. So Class 1B is for something where there's multiple tenancies up to a maximum of 12 people or a maximum building size of 300 square metres.
Cool.
So once you exceed either of those, then you tip into Class 3.
Yep.
So then you've got...
So the 9-bedders in Victoria, they need to be under 300 square metres?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Excellent.
Yep.
And then 300 square metres or bigger is Class 3, yeah?
Yep.
And what's the difference between a Class 1B and a Class 3 building?
Look, typically a whole lot more fire rating. Yep. There's either it's fire rated compartments, so each room's fire rated. Like a hotel is a Class 3 building.
Yep. So
if you've stayed in a hotel before, you know that there's a whole lot more stuff around fire, and there's sprinklers, and you've got more fire rating between rooms and solid fire doors and all that sort of stuff. evacuation paths, you usually need more options because it's a bigger building. So paths of travel to exit, you might need fire isolated stairwells if you're multi-story, or alternate paths so you're not travelling too far to an exit and you've got a choice.
Yep.
Or you might not have a choice. You might have to take a different one because there's a fire in the way.
So in the way of classification of the building, it's probably best to stay in the class 1 sort of area. Cheaper, less requirements.
Yeah.
Cheaper to build.
Yeah, and we talked about New South Wales before. There's been a lot of bigger stuff in New South Wales that goes into class 3. Either that, or there's been a few situations I've seen there where people have put multiple class 1B buildings on the one site to reduce the construction costs but still get the yield up.
Yeah, right. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah. But there's class 3 stuff there as well. Like if you're going multi-story, you're probably going to tip into class 3.
Yeah.
If you can keep it, single level or maybe 2-story, class 1B makes sense.
Yeah, we're looking at some 20 bedroom class 3 stuff over here at the minute, and bouncing between class 1B and class 3 and seeing what the cost variations are on there and if it affects the yield. Well, we know it will affect the yield, but we're just trying to see by how much.
Look, I think it's the style of construction that suits the property, because if you're saying, if you're doing something, 20 rooms is probably starting to, how many rooms did you say? 20, 30?
20 better.
20. So 20 is like, it's not a lot over 12, like it's not double 12. So there where you're probably still not quite at a tipping point. When you get to bigger stuff, like if you're doing, a 4-story place for 30 people plus, or 50 people or something in it, well, class 3 is going to be a no-brainer for that.
Yeah.
Because you've got the economies of scale when you get to that size, and you can just get it built a lot quicker. It's in the one structure. Because time's obviously pretty important when you're building as well.
Yep.
If you're lower numbers, like if you're doing 20, well, okay, can we fit that in 2 buildings and have a fire gap between them, or fire separate them, a party wall or whatever? So that might be an option, because then, if you could get 12 aside in a duplex or something, well, that might make more sense than doing a single 20-room building.
Yeah, more sense, one, definitely.
Yeah.
Mark, we've also touched on property management earlier. It's a big question I get asked on constantly. How many rooms have you got in your property management business over in Victoria?
Yeah, look, this is something that I hadn't had a big focus on. I was doing it, but I suppose I'll go a bit of the backstory on it. Like with the operating of rooming houses, I started doing that because I had my own and I was doing the on-the-ground stuff and not particularly enjoying driving around to properties and dealing with the people and stuff like that. Yep. So my thought there was, well, okay, how many do I need to be able to afford to pay somebody else to do it? So, pretty quickly employed someone to look after it. And then I thought, I'm paying this person for their time. I can leverage their time and look after other people's as well. Actually, a little bit of a backstep. The reason I did that, I couldn't find anyone who was good at it. Like most real estate agents don't do a great job.
Yep.
And I'll touch more on that in a minute. But so I sort of thought, well, okay, I've got to sort out how to do it, train people how to do it, how I want it done. And then once I was doing that, I started doing it for other people. I did, for a few years, have an arrangement with a real estate agency. So where we were working on the business together, we were doing things the way that I'd train people to do it. They were dealing with the administration side of it. Got to the point where they sort of didn't really want to grow that too much, sort of separated. They continued to do admin for me, I had people working for me. Then I started consulting to another business that had been doing property management, had taken on a couple of rooming houses, weren't quite sure how to go about it. That sort of worked out fairly well. Got them some reasonable occupancy, reasonable rents by following what I was suggesting to do. They said, oh, well, let's join up and build a bigger business. I thought, yep, that sounds good. Went along for a little while, and then they were, I think they then decided that they knew better, didn't need to do it my way and they could do it their way. Came to me and said, oh, look, we're not making enough money out of this. We need to reduce what we're paying you. And it's like, well, why would I agree to that? Let's part ways. So that was only July last year that's happened. So I've really only taken it on as a major focus in the last year and a bit.
Yep. Okay.
15 months.
Yep.
So where that business is at now, if we talk in terms of rooms, I think we're at around just under 400 rooms now.
Yep, beautiful.
But that's increased because even with the parting of ways last year, some of the property stayed with them, some came with me. So it was all a bit of a mess now with a decent focus on it. It's been rapidly expanding.
Yeah, good.
And to talk about the differences in management, I mean, you do it over there anyway.
Yeah.
But I usually describe it from a Victorian point of view. The Residential Tenancies Act here has multiple parts. It covers your standard rentals, it covers rooming houses, it covers caravan parks and residential parks. And usually ask the people, like, would you buy a caravan park and go get your local property manager to manage it?
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, why would you think they know how to do a rooming house?
Yeah.
There's differences in the legislation. There's different notice periods. There's different penalties for not getting things right. There's different requirements. Victoria is the only state that's got licensing for rooming house operators. So again, there's a different license required.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly different and takes a different approach and a different skill set.
Yeah, and different systems and processes as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you say, it's a different ballgame, and you're not just managing the house, you're managing the people that are in there as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to compare it to property management, it's not really like this, but if you had a look at an apartment block, in an apartment block, you've got your property management for the tenancies, but you've got your owner's corporation to manage the buildings and common areas. So you've got to do all of that as well as have people with closer interactions.
Yep. It's I don't think people realise how much work goes into the management of one of these things. And a lot of people just focus on the property management fee.
Yeah.
And then say, I can get that cheaper elsewhere. And my general response to that is like, just ask them how many room by room rentals they've got on their rent roll. Because if this is going to be the only one that they're going to manage at 10%, for instance, then how much effort is that property going to get compared to the other 150 properties they've got on the rent roll that don't really give them much of a headache? Yeah. It's totally different, isn't it?
Well, if I take it from my view as an investor, and like I said, I've had properties that were positive cash flow rental properties for probably near on 20 years before I was doing anything with rooming houses and unit blocks and stuff like that. I was never, as an investor, focused on the cheapest fee. I was focused on who's going to get me the better service. And interestingly enough, because with property management, and I've seen it because I am involved in some property management forums and stuff like that, some of the training on property management, they focus on, okay, what are all the other fees we can charge for? Everybody focuses on the percentage. They forget about leasing fees, advertising fees, statement fees, a fee for doing an inspection, a fee for doing this and that. And it's like there's so many other fees, and that's where they make their money because nobody looks at it. It adds
up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That 8% all of a sudden becomes 14, 15, 16%.
Exactly. Yeah. So my thing, even before I was in anything with rooming houses, with negotiating with the agents, I'd be saying, well, here's your percentage and here's all your other fees. I tell you what, I'll pay you this percentage, get rid of those fees. Right?
Do it?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd negotiate a bit out. And I think I ended up better off because that way the turnover became their problem, not mine. I wasn't paying them a leasing fee each time.
Yeah.
So
is that how your business is structured now?
And that's how I've structured it. And look, where I said a bit about how I started that business, my main intention when I started that business, operating rooming houses, was to sell it. That was my plan. I was going to build it up, put my properties in there, have someone looking after my properties and sell it so that I didn't have to look after the properties. And what I've learned from a couple of goes of people trying to run things like that is it's just going to go downhill. I have to maintain some control in it so I can maintain the quality of the service.
Yeah.
Because my properties are in there.
Yeah, true. And you know what you want. And it's very similar to what we did. We couldn't find anybody in Western Australia to manage the properties like we did. We'd approach them and say, look, we've got 5 tenants in this house. Can you rent it out for $1,000 a week? And they were like, nah, this will only rent out for 500. And we'll put everybody on the same lease and we'll do this and we'll do that. And I was like, no, we don't want that. We want this. So we had to break the mold and do it ourselves. Very similar to what you've done.
Yeah.
And
like it's
built from the ground up exactly how you want it. Yeah.
And it gets the results. And like I said, my focus with that business was on me as the owner of properties that are managed by that business. not on having a profitable business that I can make as much from the fees. I wanted it to be good for me as an owner.
Yeah.
And that's how I approach it, with anyone else that's in there. My aim is to make a good return for the owner of the properties that are in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if that property's not profitable, it looks after my properties. Our business isn't profitable, it looks after my properties, and they are.
Yeah.
And I get economies of scale because I've got more properties in there that I'm looking after. So, yeah.
Win-win.
Yeah. So that was my aim with it. It's about looking after the investors, not that business.
Yeah, good. Mate, let's talk about the RAAV.
Yep.
How did you get into that, and what does it entail?
That was 2012, I think I joined the Registered Accommodation Association. So it was suggested to me, I don't know, I suppose we can talk about other property education and that here, can we? Or
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So with the I Love Real Estate community, so with Dimpner's program, so it was Kevin Dudney was talking about something and showed an example of a rooming house development someone he knew was building in Victoria. And so that was how I became aware of the RAAV or RAAV. And so I rang the guy Kevin suggested, who was the treasurer of the association at the time, and joined the association. And it's like, oh, it's fantastic. I've only just got involved in this. I found there's an industry body. There's other people that know what they're doing. It's like, it's fantastic. Yeah. But I got pretty involved in it because at around the same time as I got into rooming houses, or just before that, I had a bit of a background, running businesses and operating businesses, and stuff had been up and down, around 2008, my wife had thyroid cancer and had her thyroid removed. A few years later, 2011 is when we decided to get out of everything. She'd had breast cancer then and had surgery, and 3 days after her surgery, I broke my leg, and we still had retail shops, and like no one can go open up, and it's like, this is just ridiculous. We had made the decision before then, look, let's just get rid of all the businesses. Property's always done well, we'll focus on property full time. But that really pushed the decision. It's like, all right, that's it, everything's going, we're just going full time property. So from being full time in property from 2011, when I'd started doing rooming houses, getting into RAAV in 2012, and similar to the management story like you were talking about, with finding out what to do with rooming houses, because you've got the planning requirements, you've got building code that we have touched on, and I don't know whether there's any more to talk about there. Then you've got your registration requirements in Victoria with Health Act requirements, and then differences all over the place. And it's like, I'm going, who can I find to explain this to me? And there was nobody. There's people that knew their part of it. Like, a building surveyor can tell you what the building's got to be. Most town planners, because there's a planning exemption in the scheme, didn't know much about it. It was really hard to get information. So I was just reading all the time. Like, I'd be up at night reading the National Construction Code, right? Riveting reading. It's like, reading planning schemes. It's like, so it got to the point where I knew the stuff really well. So by 2014, I was a director of the Registered Accommodation Association. That role does then involve a lot of consultation with government. There's a heap of stuff happening with policy reforms. I mean, the stuff they've done over the last 10 years is just ridiculous. And I shouldn't have these thoughts. Just recently I was thinking, gee, surely they've done everything they can and we can settle down for a while. No, there was a submission due yesterday, actually, that's not public yet. It's all confidential, as the government likes to do things, but a review of the rooming house regulations in Victoria. So we've sent back some comment on the initial stuff of that, and that should be out to the public soon. So that's the sort of stuff that happens with RAAV. And I suppose some of the good things is, like I've just mentioned, we get a preview of what the government's looking at doing, and we get to hopefully make the policy a little bit more sensible than what they originally come out with.
Definitely.
So, and we do get to lobby things as well, like the planning scheme over here. There has been a pretty broad exemption for a while. It used to be 10 habitable rooms. So, and a habitable room, a kitchen's included in, so we're pretty much ending up with 9 bedrooms anyway. They had proposed changing that, but they had looked at, okay, well, you've got a kitchen and living room, so that's 2 rooms, so 8 bedrooms. So they were proposing 8 bedrooms. A lot of councils were putting in submissions suggesting it should be 6 bedrooms. So this is in Victoria. And we were able to get that, get to the point to say, well, here's some financial modelling on the different things. Here's what's been built under the previous policy. You can see, what the difference is between 8 and 9 bedrooms. And even, back then, it was 2018 when that came in. You were looking middle ring Melbourne, you're saying, look, you're spending $1 million at least. You wouldn't get it for $1 million now, but you're spending $1 million at least. And here's what the rents are. For it to be financially viable, it's got to be 9 rooms. And we're able to get all that stuff back through the government, and then that's what came in the planning scheme. And then there was interpretations over floor area and roof area and all that sort of stuff. So again, by communicating with DELP, we're able to get amendments to the planning scheme to make that clearer as well. So, RAAV, I think, is a really valuable organisation. And that's why I'm happy to be involved in it. And of course, and been a director of the association since 2014, and that's not a paid position; it's totally voluntary. Mm-hmm. And all the work I do in dealing with government, don't get paid for. Nobody there gets paid.
Yeah.
So, we do it to help the industry.
Yes.
And really, I think more things like that need to happen around the country.
Yeah, 100%.
Everyone talks about how good the planning policies are in Victoria. It's like, we've got good representation.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue as well, Mark, from like the experience that you've got and the roles that you've been in. You're also coaching and mentoring people now as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
How does that work?
So we did, touch on the property education before. So again, that's through Knowledge Source, and that's I have worked with some of the other people here, like with Dimter, and I mentioned Kevin before as well. Mm-hmm. Contributed to events that they've run, and I think it was about 2019 was asked to say, well, okay, can you do something specific for rooming houses? So we're doing that. So it's through Knowledge Source. It's mostly internally marketed there at the moment. But happy to talk to anyone separately as well and take stuff on. I mean, I can give you website links for pages for more information about that if you like.
Yeah.
So and we touched on before. I do cover the whole country with that. It is pretty hard for me to keep up to speed with everything all around the country with not being actively doing things.
Yeah.
So I do try and have people established in each state that can help out with some of that as well for any students that are wanting to do stuff on the ground around the country. I'm reasonably comfortable with most of the East Coast. You said South Australia before. I've got some people looking at stuff in the ACT and that as well. Across to the West, I mean, you'd be mad to talk to anyone but you over there. So, there's people that are there doing it in each of the states, and I'll just try and steer people to the people that I know are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be careful with that too. There's people that are taking shortcuts and suggesting people do things different ways to what's fully compliant. I mean, even with the insurers, it's like, there's insurers that cover it. There's some that haven't been great. There's some that have shaped policies to fit. So, we're still doing some more work in that space too.
Nice, mate. So how can people reach out to you, Mark, if they want to know more about the rooming house expert, or if they want to know more about mentorship?
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you want me to? Well, I can tell you the websites and stuff now for things. So
give us it now, mate, and we'll also put it in the show notes of the podcast.
Sure. So, you've mentioned rooming house expert. So www.roominghouse.expert is one of those websites. There's a bit of stuff on there. That website probably has a bit more to do with the conversions of existing properties, but also has a fair bit of other information and products, like we import door locks, for example, that we use for rooming houses. They're available on there. There's information on air conditioner remotes, which you can order from there, or you can order directly from the website that sells them with a discount code that we have available. Mm-hmm. There's other products that we're looking at as well. For the development site that we touched on at the start, and we've got the Superman behind us. So development business is just www.supercashflow.com.au. My son is probably the main one that's involved in that. So it's a bit of a family business.
Yep.
In the operations business, so managing the rooming houses. And my sister's involved in that. I've got a nephew and a niece in there as well. So,
Nice.
so they're family everywhere. The education is www.iloverealestate.tv and then /Mark-Baker. So just my name with a hyphen in the middle. And that you get to watch me talk for another couple of hours, and if you think it's worthwhile, you can pay some money to hear me more.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is a topic, and like you did touch on the fact that we could talk more about the building classifications and stuff. We could talk about this for 3 to 4 hours if we needed to, really, couldn't we?
Oh, yeah.
We could dig easily. But in the interest of people listening to a podcast for like 30 to 40 minutes, then, if you want to know more, definitely reach out to Mark. Mark Baker, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you, mate. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Neil. It's been great.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you stay up to date with all the cash flow positive property updates.